Welcome back folks, my name's Shane. In today's video, I'm going to give you a rundown of the best camera gear and equipment I've tested in 2024. This is my third annual end of year wrap up, talking about my hands-on experience with products for this particular year. Now I should point out not all of the items in this list will be stuff that was released in 2024. It was just stuff I got to test in this particular year. So I hope you like this video. This video will cover cameras, lenses, on-camera monitors, lighting, and some other accessories, some of which I think I should have bought sooner. So we're going to talk about that in this video as well. I hope you enjoy the video. If you can, leave a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. Let's get into it. Let's start with some camera bodies. We're going to start with Micro Four Thirds. So at the start of 2024, in January, I ended up getting this. This is the G9 Mark II, and this is before we all knew that the GH7 was coming out. And I'm a big fan of this camera. I've actually been using it a lot for vlogging on my other channel, and this has become my main B-roll camera anytime I'm shooting products. I can get nice and close with the Micro Four Thirds lenses. The 4K at 50, 60, or 120p out of this looks absolutely stunning. But anytime I need a B camera to the GH7, this is still my go-to camera. I really like this. I have no plans on getting rid of it. I know some people experienced overheating in certain shooting scenarios, and if they were powering the camera and then running HDMI out, hasn't been a problem for me for the kind of work that I do in the studio. I can let this run all day. I took it to Perth early in 2024 and it survived there as well. It's coming back to Perth with me in a few days time after shooting this video. So this is an absolute beast of a Micro Four Thirds camera. If you're a photo video hybrid shooter, I can still highly recommend it. All right, over to the Panasonic Lumix GH7, which is the video-centric version of the G9 Mark II. It's essentially the same camera. We get basically the same sensor, all of the same recording modes, except this will also do RAW, either to the CFExpress type B card slot or to an SSD externally. The biggest benefits of the GH7 is we get a more user-friendly design when it comes to shooting video. This has one of those flip out and around screens that you can also flip back on itself like this, which makes for some really ergonomic shooting. And of course, the big thing, we get active cooling. There's a big old fan in the side here, and this helps it stay cool. This is one of those cameras you can't overheat. One of the reasons I prefer using the GH7 even over my Sony FX3 that I recently sold, this just has some of the best in-body image stabilization I've ever seen, and so does the G9 Mark II. But if you're a handheld shooter and you don't mind working with a smaller sensor, this looks amazing. It also looks amazing in the studio. There's been a few times where I've set up the GH7 just to see if anyone noticed the difference in the camera, and not one person complained. So this is an absolute beast. Another really cool thing about the GH7 is, unlike other models, there's no wheel around the shutter here. So if you like to use that, you're not going to accidentally knock any of your other settings. There's also a little lever on the opposite side that allows you to lock the camera basically once it's recording. But there's a front record button, tally lights on the front. This is an absolutely killer camera, and it's arguably the most underrated camera of 2024, but let us know what you think. And lastly, we're going to talk about the Panasonic S9. This is an absolute beast of a camera if you're into smaller hybrid cameras. Now, when it comes to how I like to operate, I'm a big fan of kind of like underdog cameras. I love shooting Micro Four Thirds because it's got a smaller sensor, and when I get great results out of it, I feel like I've actually achieved something, as opposed to the full frame cameras, which makes it really easy. I'm shooting on the S5 Mark IIX right now. It's my primary studio camera, and it's great. It's so easy to get a great look out of, but sometimes the limitations of cameras are somewhat motivating for me to shoot with. And while the S9 isn't the camera for everybody, I've thoroughly enjoyed this enough to purchase a second one. I ended up trading in my FX30 a little while ago to get a second one of these because I prefer a camera with a better IBIS system. A few years ago, I went overseas to shoot a show on my other channel, and it was like a 7-part series, and I took my FX3, A7S III, my G Master lenses, and a whole bunch of other stuff, and the bag was so expensive. I ended up having to run so much of that footage through Catalyst Browse because of the stabilizer in those cameras for the kind of run and gun stuff we were doing. I wish these were out at the time. I would have bought 2 of these, and the end result would have been every bit as good in comparable frame rates. I love the fact that this ties in so seamlessly to the real-time LUT option through Lumix Lab. That app is so good. It's completely changed my workflow. Anytime I'm in the studio here, I'm using my custom profile. Anytime I'm shooting out in the field, I'm using my custom profile. It saves me having to do anything in post-production. I simply take the footage out of the camera, put it in my computer, and I'm done. I love the workflow, and this has really contributed to that. Overall, the S9 is kind of like a B or a C camera to this S5 Mark IIX in the studio, if I choose not to use my S5 Mark IIs back here set up for my other channel. But this is so good for travel. I love its flexibility. It takes great photos. And while it doesn't have a mechanical shutter and a hot shoe for the kind of stuff I do when I travel, it makes no difference. It will work with a wireless pack. There's a 3.5mm audio jack on the side. And if you want to see my recent review of this, definitely check it out. I'll link it up in the cards. Let's cover lenses. We're going to start with micro four thirds. We'll go over to L mount, and then we'll talk about E mount. That's right. I also reviewed a bunch of E mount lenses, but I'm known as the Lumix guy, even though I had 3 or 4 Sony cameras there for a while. So yeah, there's plenty of E mount review videos on my channel, but we're going to start with micro four thirds with maybe one of my favorite current lenses, and that is this. This is the 9mm f1.7 prime. This is the Leica one. Now, on the G9 Mark II or even the GH7, it's such a great pairing. You get a really premium look, and it's that 18mm field of view equivalent for micro four thirds. And being that it's f1.7, you can still create some really nice subject separation if you're up close. Now, for vloggers or anyone doing any sort of handheld work, that's where this really shines. This has become my go-to on the G9 Mark II anytime I'm doing any sort of vlogging, because even if I'm using the E-stabilization built into the new micro four thirds cameras, I've got myself a wide enough field of view that's still going to look really premium. Unlike the 15mm f1.7, which has an autofocus manual focus switch, and it also gives us an aperture ring, the 9mm f1.7 doesn't give you basically anything other than a focus ring, but it feels so good to use. And one of the things I've really come to appreciate is how the Panasonic lenses tie into the manual focus experience on their cameras thanks to that linear focusing option. So if you're looking for a really great super wide angle prime lens, this is at the top of the list. This next micro four thirds lens just made the list. It is the Sigma 16mm f1.4. Now, I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with this lens already. I think it's a great lens overall, but there's a few things that I definitely don't like about it. And a few people mentioned this in the reviews, but I didn't realize how much it would impact me when I'm using this lens. Now, let's just put it this way. If I'm using autofocus on the G9 Mark II or GH7, this lens is great. It works beautifully. It's got this big focus ring here, which I absolutely love. There's no autofocus manual focus switch or aperture ring or anything on here, but optically this is pretty solid. It's not perfect. At f1.4, you can definitely notice some chromatic aberration with this lens, but the problem I have with it is the focus ring. Now, it feels so good to use, but when I pair it onto any of the Panasonic camera bodies that I've got, you can't use the linear focusing option. So if I turn it too fast, it's just going to focus so fast back or forth, and I usually miss my focus spot, especially for shooting video. I found this a little bit problematic, to be honest. So it is what it is. I thought I'd be able to get great results out of this, and I can, but it's sort of relegated to a talking headshot in this kind of scenario. But overall, the Sigma 16mm f1.4 is good. I just don't know if it's that much better than something like the Panasonic Leica 15mm f1.7. This is faster and you'll get better low light results. It's also a slightly different field of view, but the Panasonic lens, at least with my testing, didn't have the same sort of autofocus performance as this. This has great autofocus. So if you're looking for a lens that can do a talk to camera headshot like this and give you a really premium look, this is great. But if you're looking for something smaller and lighter, the Panasonic Leica would be the way to go. Up next, we're going to talk about L mount. Now, L mount for me this year has been the year of affordable and beautiful macro lenses, and none have been more impressive than this. This is the TT Artisan 100mm f2.8. This has a 2:1 or a 2 times reproduction, so you can get insanely close to your subject. This was the most impressive macro lens of the year. I also got to test out Panasonic's 100mm f2.8 macro, and while that's got autofocus motors and all that kind of stuff, this will get you in closer. It's less expensive, and the end result, at least to my eye, looked even better. There's very low chromatic aberration with this. There's not a lot of imperfections in the image. Whether you're shooting photos or video, it looks absolutely beautiful. This particular lens just blew my mind about how close I could get to a subject. So if you like shooting bees, insects, or anything up close, like jewelry or anything like that, and you're on a budget, this TT Artisan lens will give you pro results at a fraction of the price. So yeah, I can highly recommend this. I would almost say that this is lens of the year for me. Another lens which completely surprised me is this guy right here. This is the Sirui 35mm T 2.9, and this is a 1.6 times D squeeze, so it's very wide. It's not as wide as you can get for Cine lenses, and this has that really beautiful natural or neutral flare, which I think looks much better than the blue one. I like the blue one for nighttime shots, but it does look a little bit sci-fi. I find it a little bit distracting, whereas this looks beautiful. Now, I paired this with the S5 Mark IIX when I did the review, and the end result looks absolutely beautiful, and I stopped it all the way down as well, and I was still able to get really great results. And while this isn't the fastest Cine lens, it is T2.9, it still gives you enough background separation. The only real critique I have with this is that the minimum focus distance is pretty poor. It's like, from memory, somewhere around 1 meter. So it's, 100 centimeters away, whereas other lenses will get you in a little bit closer. Now, there's ways of kind of cheating the system with that. You can go into like an APS-C crop mode or whatever, but yeah, if you want to shoot full frame, the minimum focusing distance was a little bit restrictive, but this looks so good, and those neutral flares just looked absolutely stunning to my eye, but let's know what you think. Let's talk Viltrox lenses for the Sony E-mount. These are both full frame and APS-C compatible lenses. The first one that I really loved was the Viltrox 56mm f1.7 prime lens, and I own this Sony Zeiss 55mm f1.8, and putting these side by side, there was next to no difference in the image quality. I was really shocked at the overall end result. Now, that Sony Zeiss lens, the 55 f1.8, is legendary about how it sort of separates you from the background. The Viltrox lens did almost exactly the same thing, and again, these are a fraction of the price. While the build quality doesn't feel as good as the Sony lens, the end result is, and you're also saving a fortune as well. So this Viltrox lens, the 56mm, definitely lands a spot in the best of 2024. Another Viltrox lens that completely surprised me was the Viltrox 16mm f1.8. This is a super wide angle lens. Now, this is almost like a G Master lens in terms of its build quality and features. It has everything. It has a clickable or declickable aperture ring. You get a function button on the side. It gives you an LCD screen as well to let you know the distance from your subject. Now, my only critique with this lens at the time was that the autofocus isn't quite as fast as, say, some of the super wide angle lenses you can get natively for Sony, and that's still the case, at least to my knowledge, as of right now. This lens is so good that I don't plan on ever buying a super wide angle lens for the E-mount. Not that I have any cameras right now, but I will probably get another one next year. It's a beautiful lens, and it just renders a beautiful image. It's optically very good. I couldn't find any major flaws when it came to photography or video, and the autofocus works well enough that if you're just standing in frame, it's going to work, but if you do push towards it, it just takes a moment to catch you, and I tested this out on my Sony FX3 and A7S3. Overall though, this is a really great lens. If you're looking for a super wide angle lens that has all the bells and whistles and a little LCD screen, the Viltrox lens is definitely the way to go. Up next is a pair of Cine lenses. You can actually buy 3 of these, but this came in a 2-pack, and it was the Sirui Sniper 16 and 75mm t1.2 lenses for APS-C cameras. And I got to test these on the E-mount, and they were absolutely beautiful. Now, the 75mm t1.2 was some of the best image quality I've ever filmed. It looks unbelievable. You can create so much subject separation and background blur. I shot all of this footage using the Sony FX30, and if you're a Sony FX30 shooter looking for a full frame look, this camera and lens combination is absolutely beautiful. While the 75mm lens had exceptional autofocus paired with my FX30, the 16mm kind of fell apart when it came to its autofocus. It was fine for stuff like this, but if you hold something up to the camera and bring it back down, it would sometimes just go all crazy and erratic. So I can't really recommend that for the best autofocus performance. I'm hoping that's been rectified in a firmware update by now, because it has been several months since I did my review. They've got a carbon fiber body as well, and while they don't have any bells and whistles like aperture rings or manual focus, autofocus switches, if you know how to get around that on your camera, you're going to have a whole lot of fun shooting with these. And I would recommend, if you're using a Sony camera without any sort of fancy stabilization system, to use it on a gimbal. If you use it on a gimbal, you're going to get great results. I found the 75mm t1.2 way too hard to film, especially handheld. Maybe the most impressive lens of 2024 when it came to dedicated APS-C lenses is the Viltrox 27mm f1.2. This gave me essentially full frame results on an APS-C sensor. Now, I had a Sony FX3 and the FX30, and the look was basically identical in the same sort of shooting scenarios with, you know, equivalent shallow depth of field and all that kind of stuff. This lens is an absolute pleasure to use. The autofocus performance is great. The build quality is great. Optically, I had no problems with it when it came to shooting video. And if you're a video shooter shooting APS-C and you want to let in the most amount of light and get a really blurry background, this Viltrox lens will definitely be the one to choose. Interestingly enough, this 27mm focal length is just over 40 millimeters. It's like 40.5 or something like that. So it's not a traditional 50mm lens or a 35. It's kind of like right in the middle. And it's just a beautiful look. This is definitely one of the most impressive lenses of 2024. All right, let's talk about some audio equipment and accessories, but we're going to start with some mics. So the first one is the Rode Interview Pro. This is a handheld wireless microphone system that pairs with your Rode Wireless Go 2 or 3 or whatever they're up to now, and it essentially gives you 32-bit float recording in a handheld microphone. So not only can you use this wirelessly and record into your camera, you've got backup recording built directly into it. The benefit of 32-bit float is it's basically unclippable. In post-production, you can essentially move clipped audio down or move really quiet audio up without increasing the noise floor. So 32-bit float is really powerful. The Rode Interview Pro is a microphone I plan on using next year when I shoot a new documentary. It's been a few years since I've done one, and I want to interview a few people, and that will be the microphone. One, because it sounds great. Two, because it's got that wireless connectivity. And third, I've got redundancy thanks to that backup recording. Speaking of 32-bit float, backup recording, and all that kind of good stuff, Comica, they released something that is basically the same thing, but in a shotgun microphone. And this is great. It's called the VM40, and this microphone is really impressive. Not only does it record wirelessly to your camera via a little receiver, but it also records internally, giving you all the same features I just mentioned on the Rode Interview Pro. So if you're looking for a shotgun microphone variation on this, which they kind of crept ahead of Rode in this particular case, this Comica microphone is really great. Now, it's been out for a while, and I was one of the first to get my review video up, and a lot of people were pretty impressed with the overall sort of sound quality of the microphone. My only complaint with this mic is that the windshield thing that it comes with isn't very good. If I use this outside in the field, I'll be taking one of my Rode ones with me. But I love the fact that it has that internal recording, and the internal recording does sound quite a lot better though than when it's transmitted wirelessly to the receiver and then the receiver into your camera. Then you're at the mercy of those preamps. So if you want the best audio quality, that 32-bit float is definitely something that you'll be really impressed by. The user interface on the microphone and transmitter is all relatively easy. Once you get a feel for it, it's a really impressive piece of kit. I can highly recommend it. If you missed my video, I'll link it up in the cards. This next section will be quite short, but in 2024, I got a chance to test a whole lot of great and pretty average field monitors. The one that really stood out was the Viltrox DC-X3. This is not only great value, but it's built really well. It's the one I've been using the most. The image quality is great. The build quality is really good. It came with a battery, and it came with everything you need to get going. So Viltrox really did a great job with this particular field monitor. It gives you all the readouts you could possibly ask for at a reasonable price. I don't think it's too expensive. And again, Viltrox made the list because they're making great stuff. 2024 was the year I think I'm now converted over to CFExpress type beat cards. I'm such an idiot. I kind of dismissed them for so long, like, man, they're too expensive. Why would I want a CFExpress type B card? Now, I had a CFExpress type A card on my Sony FX3 and FX30, but man, the price of CFExpress type B cards in Australia was brutal until Black Friday, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to get one of these. I've got a GH7, I've had a GH6 for a few years that Panasonic sent me for a review many years ago, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to test out this. So I bought one, and this is the Pro Grade 512 gigabyte with a read speed of 3,400 megabytes per second, and a sustained write speed of 850. Now, this is the new CFExpress with a 4 under it, so it's faster than the standard ones, and this is fast enough for me to record RAW internally with the GH7. Another benefit to this card is it's blisteringly fast to transfer files off the card or directly from the camera, if you've got a read or whatever, to your SSD drive. It's like ridiculously fast. I transferred something like 40 gig in no time at all. Like, it took seconds as opposed to minutes like it normally would, even with a V90 card. So just for that speed up in my overall time spent moving files around, the CFExpress Type B card is definitely the way to go. If you want to check out this particular one for the GH6 or 7, I'll link it down below, but I love this. The thing I love about having this 512GB card, if I'm shooting an MP4 or MOV, I get 7 hours and 27 minutes of record time, which is absolutely insane, but the transfer speeds make it worth it, and I'm glad I've got a card that's compatible with this camera, you know, throughout all of the different frame rates, resolutions, and codecs. Not that I'm ever really going to shoot RAW for what I do, but I just wanted a card that could do it all, especially for testing purposes. So yeah, I can highly recommend this Pro Grade. I'll link it down below. All right, if you're a filmmaker, this next one's for you. This is the DJI RS4 combo. I always have to slow myself down when I say DJI. Otherwise, I say DJI, like everyone else does. It's hard to say, man. Try saying it fast. This RS4 is arguably the best gimbal I've tested. There's been a few really cool ones, like the Hohem one with the AI sort of tracking thing, but this, being that it's a DJI one, you know you're getting a quality unit, and it can support basically every camera and lens lineup in my collection, which is fantastic. It holds a maximum of 3 kilograms. This gimbal has a new stabilization system that sort of refines the micro jitters. I didn't see any on my test shots. It looked really good. I think the thing that makes this as usable as it is, we get an extra arm on there, so if you plan on shooting low to the ground, it's nice and easy. And I love the fact that this pack also comes with the focus motor. So if I'm using one of my Sirui Cine lenses over here, it's going to work without any problems, and I can pull focus just by using the little wheel that's built into it. This is great. I'm absolutely blown away by this. The last DJI gimbal I tested was the one that I purchased back in 2019. So they've come a long way. That was the Ronin S that I'm always whinging about how heavy it is. But this is light. It's got a decent payload. It's built beautifully. It's got all of these auto-locking features and so forth built into it. But the end result, whether you're shooting with Sony, Lumix, or any of the other camera brands, will give you excellent results. And this has definitely got a spot on the best of 2024. Let's talk about some of the lighting that I've tested this year. It's been a pretty cool year for testing out different styles of lamps, and lighting will improve your end result irrespective of the camera system that you're using. So always think about lights before you just buy another lens or another camera body. I should take my own advice. But this RT25 from Small Rig has become my go-to product photography or videography lamp. I use this so much, and it's really easy to use. We've got an on-off switch here at the top. You get a big dial in the center, which allows you to control the brightness and also the color temperature and all that kind of stuff. It also has effects built into it. Now, this whole lower section here is the battery. So the battery life is excellent, and I love the fact it's got a 1/4-20 screw point on the bottom. So I can use this on a tripod. I can use it on my monopod, move it around nice and simply. And again, just hold it up if I need some color fill in a photo for a camera body or whatever it is I'm taking a photo of. So it's just been a really great addition to the studio, and I can highly recommend the RT25. I also had a chance to test out one of the more professional lighting kits from GVM, which is a really great lighting brand. Now, this is the SD300B, and this lamp was unbelievable in terms of build quality, but also its end result. And I love the fact you don't have to crank it up to 50 or 100% to get anywhere near the same sort of brightness I would get in here in the studio from my other lamps. You can just run it low, and it's great. I think one of the standout features with this is it's plenty bright. Obviously, it's a no-brainer. The build quality is really impressive, and it comes with a really amazing softbox, which kind of like clicks out into place and locks. If you've ever been dealing with those like cheap eBay or Amazon softboxes where you got to put in the poles and they fall out all the time and they feel like crap, this is in a whole different level to that. It's a really professional light. When I move house in the next few months, I'll be setting that up as my primary light in the studio. At least that's the plan. So yeah, it's a really great light. Now, the only sort of compromise with it is that the stand you get, while it's exceptional quality, it does fill up quite a lot of space. So this would be best suited to someone who's got quite a lot of room in the studio, or if you're, you know, shooting out on a set or whatever, it'd be the ultimate lamp for that. But if you're just using it in a spare bedroom like I am, the physical floor space of the stand does take up quite a lot of room. So just keep that in mind. But in terms of the light itself, it is really impressive. And again, I can highly recommend GVM. I actually purchased a few of their lights before I had an opportunity to review this SD300B, and man, I'm glad I have. It's easily the best light of the year. Alright, I have to round this video out by talking about the worst product of 2024 that I got to test, or maybe the most confusing. It's not necessarily like the worst thing ever, but it's maybe the worst decision ever. I'm going to talk about this right now. So this is the Panasonic Lumix S-Series 26mm f8. So back in the old days of photography, there was this whole f8 and B there, which basically gives you everything in focus. The problem I have with the lens is that it's just not very usable for a beginner, and this was a lens that is now free if you buy an S9, which I think is pretty cool. Now, it's a fun little lens, and you can get some decent results out of it, but it's only suited for photographers who are happy shooting at only f8. There's no aperture control or anything like that. It's very plasticky. There's just no options on it, and it's 100% manual focus. And while it's a great physical size for the S9, you know, that new 18 to 40mm lens is in a completely different stratosphere compared to the 26mm f8, which confused a lot of us. Now, I got a chance to go to Japan and test out the S9 at launch, and that lens was so confusing. I ended up doing a quick vlogging test with it, and you can even be out of focus. At arm's length, you can still mess up the focus because f8 on full frame still creates a bit of subject separation and background blur. Not much, but enough to, if your focus isn't correct, then you're going to be out of focus. But while I like the form factor of this lens, I would love to see Panasonic perhaps make sort of like a series of f2 primes, even if they've got a plastic body, if they can keep the size down and give us autofocus. I think they'll be onto a winner. But yeah, I think this was maybe the most confusing lens of 2024, at least in my experience. Thanks for watching, folks. My name's Shane. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, all that kind of stuff. I hope you have a great end of 2024. Thanks for all the support with the channel as well. If you haven't been here for a while, I am posting more often than I was even 6 months ago. So yeah, I'm posting at least a couple of videos a week, or aspiring to do that. And it's a great mix of content, from live streaming equipment to microphones to camera gear, camera accessories, all that kind of fun stuff. So if you're into that, click the notification bell. Thanks again for watching. If you have any comments or questions, let us know, and let me know what the best or worst piece of gear you tested or tried in 2024 was. Thanks for watching.